world solutions aren't going to work. All those self-help books that they write. And this is something else about that whole section. So you get to the self-help book, and then across, normally in most Barnes & Nobles, the Bible section's on the other side. And you walk up and down the religious section, and there's all different books about, different religions and stuff like that. But to buy a Bible, last time we went to Barnes & Noble, I found 6 Bibles in the whole store. That's all they were selling. And only one of them was a King James Version. Maybe it was just a popular book and people bought them all. I'd like to think that. I don't know, but Barnes & Noble had 6 Bibles the last time we went to that store. Getting off topic here. Blessings of Christians' relationship. Tonight we're going to see how parents and children, servants and masters should behave toward each other. And this is a Sunday school lesson that I taught one time before. But this behavior is based on principles taught in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 21. And that verse says, submitting yourselves one another to the fear of God. And I don't care what relationship it is, but especially when it comes to Christians and each other, we ought to submit ourselves to one another in the fear of God. I got off track there for a second. This behavior is only possible when we're willing to submit ourselves, folks, in that type of fear of God. It's not described as exceptional behavior. Rather, this behavior is expected from those who believe in Jesus. It's impossible for those who don't believe in Jesus. A lost person will only be frustrated if he tries to behave this way. Forced righteousness will produce an internal conflict that is impossible to resolve, and eventually the flesh is going to win over. And in contrast, a child of God or a saved person can always find the spiritual resources to follow if he just reads the Word of God. When he does, life takes on a whole new meaning. The child of God can find true fulfillment in life. Paul addressed this society of his day, and the teachings given to masters and slaves set forth principles that apply to any workplace. So when I talk about masters and slaves tonight, I'm not talking about slavery. I'm talking about your workplace. I'm going to let you know a little secret. Nobody ever knows this. I've never had a supervisor catch on. In the Navy, we had chiefs, and you'd always talk to chiefs, and you better call them chief. But like our LPOs and officers like that, or if it was a lieutenant or something like that, I always said boss. Hey, boss. So, and it's kind of my little, hey, boss. So like, even today at work, I don't even call my boss's name. I just say, hey, boss. Hey, boss. Just kind of a little dig. But I'm not talking about slavery. But tonight when we're talking about masters and slaves, we're talking about our work relationships, okay? Let's start off with verse 1 of chapter 6. Paul says to the church here at Ephesus, he says, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor thy father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise. That is, that it may be well with thee, and that thou mayest live long on the earth. And ye fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in nurture and admonition of the Lord. Children are addressed first, I believe, perhaps because not everybody's a parent. But everyone is a child. In my brain, I'm still 12 years old. I don't care how old I get. That's not what I mean by everyone's a child. We're all a child of God, are we not? You wouldn't be here tonight if you wasn't somebody's child. So everybody is a child. And this simple warning is repeated from the Old Testament. Paul repeats a warning that we read in the Old Testament, and that is that children are to obey their parents in the Lord. And there's 2 thoughts here. First, children are to be obedient. No matter how old you are, your parents are older. They have that age and they have that experience to arrive at a destination that you haven't been to yet. We should cherish our parents' counsel, and we need to respect them. Mike, how old are you? How old are you, Mike? 39. Mike, I'm 87 years old. I love talking to people who are older than me. You know why? Because y'all got experience that I haven't had yet. Sitting there talking about the grocery stores before church started. I haven't heard the word A&P in years. Now, Piggly Wiggly I've heard of because we still have those down south. We still have Piggly Wigglies down south. But I hadn't heard about A&P in years. That brought back memories. The thing is we should cherish our parents' counsel, and we should respect them. The divine order in a home is for the children to be obedient. When children become masters, the home is headed for trouble. You understand that? Nothing says, I don't work inside the schools like you do. But you can tell which children that you have that is in your class about who runs their home. I was talking to Dwayne Love, the softball coach, and he was talking about, no, it wasn't Dwayne, it was you. Some parent emailed you the other night because their kid didn't get to try out for volleyball, and the parent was apologizing, trying to make it the parent's fault. Now, the parent wasn't in school. They didn't hear about when volleyball tryouts were out. The kid just didn't pay attention, and the kid's calling the mom to call you to see if she can play on the team. Not to try out for the team, mind you, but to be on the team. Is that not what she was saying? Shh. My mom and daddy wouldn't have done that for me. Folks, children do not have the knowledge or skills to be leaders and to know what is best for them, or to know what's best for the home in general. And the vital qualification is added that this obedience is in the Lord. Paul adds that this obedience needs to be in the Lord. A child is never obligated to do wrong because of parental direction. I don't want you to think that. Children are to be as informed as possible, but they are to yield to the wisdom of those who brought them into life. That brought back so many times when my mama says, I brought you in this world and I'll take you out of it. I'm 50 years old. I'm 6'1". I weigh 312 pounds. And my mama today, 74 years old, a little over 5 foot tall, still tells me she'll take me out of this world. And I believe her. Ephesians 6:2 repeats the fifth commandment. It says, and the fifth commandment is found in Exodus chapter 20, verse 12. But Ephesians 6:2 repeats it. Paul noted that this is the first commandment that has a promise attached to it, okay? A promise. And this is very important for kids to understand. It's very important for us to understand because we're all children, right? We're all somebody's child. And listen to the promise. It's twofold. It will be well with us if we honor our parents, and we will live a long life. You want to live a long life? Honor your parents. I tell kids all the time, especially the unruly ones, and especially when I see them disrespect their parents or something at a football game, or the parents pick them up from practice. I'm like, hey, dude, you're shortening your life if you don't start obeying. Do you not understand that? You want to live a long life? Honor your parents. And I believe that goes even after your parents have passed on. Thankfully, my mom and dad are still alive, and I try to spend as much time with them as I can. But even when they have passed on and gone on to be to heaven, you still need to honor them. You still need to honor them. Don't speak badly of them. I used to joke. My mama will tell you a story, and she'll tell you the same story, in the next 10 minutes that you never heard. Now, some people say, oh, mama's going senile. No, she just wants to make sure you heard it. That's it. She just wants to make sure you heard it because you probably didn't comment on it. It's not mysterious. Stress is physically deadly, and there are very few more stressful situations in life than conflicts between parents and children. And I think back to when Dustin was growing up and Marie was growing up, because I raised them, about the things that we went through. It was about all I could stand not to put Dustin through a concrete wall one time. Just, I never will forget. There was and when that time happened in my life, it took me back to a time when I was 18 years old, and my daddy had me by my neck and stuck me up against the bedroom wall and said, "I brought you in this world, I'll take you out of it." And it all comes back around. I remember calling my daddy and saying, "I apologize." But that type of relationship between kids and parents, it can be stressful. I'm going to tell you something about stress. Stress will kill you. Stress affects your heart. And this is, and you can ask anybody with a medical background. Stress will affect your heart. If your heart is messed up, your body's not pumping blood. And if your body's not pumping blood, your brain's not getting blood. Stress will kill you. There are over 120,000 deaths a year, and the cause is stress. Nothing else. They died of COVID. No. Knowing how to deal with these stressful situations will not only improve the quality of our lives, folks, but avoiding stressful conflicts will also make our lives longer. And these teachings are not a punishment. They're not a punishment for parents, and they're not a punishment for children. God knows what he's doing, and this is a recipe for success. Parents are also asked to submit to the Lord. That is the key here. If more parents would submit to the Lord, I don't think you would have the problems that parents are having with their children now. I actually, going to that thing yesterday, that graduation, and watching, what's her name? No, Alyssa's daughter. Watching Leighton. Leighton's 8 years old. I am very thankful that I don't have to raise kids in this age with smartphones and TikTok and all the other garbage that goes on. They had a football game on TV, so a lot of the guys were actually sitting around talking for a change. But when the commercials would come on, you know the first thing everybody did? It's like, we can still talk about the football game. I like watching some of the stupid commercials. But Leighton had gotten on TikTok. And the mother was looking at Leighton's phone. Leighton's 8 years old and got a smartphone. Number one, I think that's a problem. She was on Corinne's phone. Either way, the kid had a phone and wasn't being supervised. I couldn't imagine raising kids in this age. It scared me to death. But parents are asked to submit to the Lord. Parents are to avoid behavior that's going to provoke their children to wrath. No parent should make this relationship or his relationship with his children a test of wills. And I think about that, and I think about the mistakes that I made with Dustin and Marie growing up. I grew up with Thomas Ridgway. Thomas Ridgway, John Wayne. It was going to be his way or the highway, and that was it. And I kind of took that parenting style with Dustin. As he got older and older, we kind of butted heads some. Because Dustin has that mentality. I made mistakes as a father. And I think if we're all honest with ourselves, we all make mistakes as parents. Do we not? We're not perfect. We shouldn't make it a test of wills. And if this happens, the result's going to be anger and resentment. A parent should be reasonable and loving in his request of his children. He should consider their welfare in every decision. There will not always be complete harmony in every home. There wasn't harmony in our house all the time. But it's better for the children to cry now than for the parents to cry later. Parents are ultimately responsible for bringing up their children, and often parents make the difficult decisions, but they should not shirk from making those difficult decisions. I never will forget, I told Dustin when he was 18 years old, we were talking about the motorcycle accident before church that happened up in Big Rock. I didn't know anything about it. I told Dustin, When he was in high school, he had to be home at 10:30 because nothing good happens after 10:30 at night. Nothing good happens after 10:30. I think everybody ought to be in bed at 9 myself, but that's what time I go to bed. Julie would stay up and wait for him. I'd just go to bed. How many times do you stay up waiting for Dustin to come home? Parents shouldn't make difficult decisions, but they should not shirk from, or parents should make difficult decisions, but they shouldn't shirk from making them. In other words, they shouldn't put off making them. I told Dustin when he was 18, I said, dude, I'm your daddy. We can be friends when you're 25. I've now changed that to we can be friends when he's 30. The goal of parents should be to bring their children to mature adulthood, both physically and spiritually. And a person who neglects the physical care of his children has denied the faith that we find in 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 8. It says that the parent who neglects his children's spirituality is driving them even greater harm, is what Ephesians 6:4 tells us. And ye fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition admonition of the Lord. A selfish child will not honor his parents, and a selfish parent will provoke his children to wrath. And in contrast, parents and children who are willing to submit themselves to the Lord and each other will find a wonderful relationship with each other in the homes. Now let's talk about servants. Verses 5 through 8. Servants, Paul says, servants, be obedient to them that are your masters, according to the flesh, with fear and trembling, in singleness of your heart, as unto Christ, not with eye service or men pleasers, but as the servants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart, with good will doing service as to the Lord and not to men, knowing that whatsoever good thing any man doeth, the same shall he receive of the Lord, whether he be bond or free. As I was reading that, I thought of something that I want to talk about kids and stuff before I move on. Because Dustin and Marie and McKenna, I have another daughter, they don't live in my house anymore. They're off on their own. McKenna lives in Oregon with our grandson Hudson and John, her significant other. I say that because they're not married yet. Dustin has a girlfriend named Megan. Marie has a boyfriend named Ryan. Now, just because they don't live in my house anymore doesn't take my father responsibilities away from them. They're living a life that I don't think they necessarily should be living. They're not married yet. But I don't hound them and remind them of that fact all the time and provoke wrath and start an argument with them. As a father, the best thing I can do, the best way I can bring them up now, is to set a good example, the best example I can. And if it comes up in conversation, they know how I feel about it. They already know how I feel. They know where I stand. So me saying something else about it ain't going to do nothing but start an argument with them. They know where I stand. They know how I feel. And when they start talking about things, it's not that I shirk the responsibility. It's not that I don't remind them that they're doing something wrong. It's just I tell them what could happen if they were to submit to the Lord. And you can't submit to the Lord and be living with somebody. What I want us to understand, though, is just because the kids don't live at home anymore, it doesn't take our parents' responsibilities away from us. Yes, my mama said it best. You made your own bed, you have to sleep in it. I'm not there to make it for you no more. All right, let's talk about masters and servants now. Let's talk about servants. So Paul says in 5 through 8, we just read those verses. There's a divine order for all the teachings between wives and husbands and children and parents and servants and masters. And we're going to look at servants and masters now. Servants right now. Often problems in the workplace are a reflection of problems at home. Did you know that? A lot of times problems in the workplace come from problems at the house. They always say don't take your work home with you, right? When I worked in Westmont, I had about an hour and a half, 2-hour drive to decompress. The problems that I had, it gave me about that much time to cool off before I got home and dealt with Julie and the kids. Now, thank goodness for volleyball season, Julie don't get home till 6 o'clock, and I've got time to decompress before she gets home. But a lot of times she'll walk in the door and we'll just start talking about our day. Not slamming each other, but just talking about our day. We were talking about work just before we came to church tonight, weren't we? You were saying something. I wasn't listening, but I heard you. You were talking about something to do. Well, if you can't remember, it's not important. No, you were talking about something at work. About you couldn't believe so-and-so. Oh. I knew it was about work. Yeah, it's not Memorial Day tomorrow, folks. It's Labor Day. Bob, you missed that one this morning. This morning's message, I'd been studying it a little bit here and there all week, and it was a Memorial Day message because I knew we had a 3-day weekend because I thought tomorrow was Memorial Day. I had to change my message at 5 o'clock yesterday evening. All right, let's get back to servants. When things aren't right at the home, it's difficult for them to be right anywhere else, is where I'm getting at. If you're having problems at home and you go to work, you're gonna take those problems with you. And it's going to affect your coworkers. It might make you say something you shouldn't say to your boss, too. I don't know. Importantly, Paul did not address the evils of slavery. We're talking about masters and servants here. Paul did not address the evil of slavery. Estimates are that when this was written, the Roman Empire had as many as half the people, half the men, half the women, and half the children were enslaved in the Roman Empire. Slavery was normal at that time. It was a normal condition. That's why Paul talked about it in a normal aspect here. He's talking about servants and masters. It was normal. Everyone understood it, although surely everyone also knew that slavery was essentially evil and wrong. I thank God that slavery isn't going on to the extent that it used to. There's still slavery in the world, folks. There is. Do what? It's actually worse. I actually saw something on that the other day. And when I was studying for this evening, I couldn't find it again. But I actually saw that slavery is worse today than it was from what we knew back in the 1800s. Sadly, though, there are still some places on earth where men enslave each other. And throughout the ages, good people have found themselves in bad situations. And these verses here, verses 5 through 8, tell us how to handle ourselves when we do find ourselves in those situations. And I want us to remember the key to all of this was submission to each other, but submission to each other in the fear of the Lord. A servant was to obey his master and do his work to the best of his ability. The servant was to serve with fear and trembling. Every situation, folks, this side of hell can be made worse. Every situation this side of hell can be made worse. You see, a servant was to have the proper respect for his master and fear his own heart and the desire that might be sown there to rebel and perhaps steal or cheat his master. Now Paul's talking about slavery here, but I want us to think about our job. Things go wrong at our jobs, and we like to think, well, the company can afford it, right? Or I'm going to punch in and go have a cup of coffee. I'm going to take a little nap. Nobody's watching. By the way, if you ever get caught sleeping at work, you know what to do, right? You ever get caught sleeping at work, all you got to do is say, in Jesus' name I pray, amen. And nobody will say a word to you. I promise you. A servant was to serve sincerely, not just doing what looked good to eye service. You ever met those guys? You ever worked with those guys at work, and the only time they worked was when the boss showed up? Other than that, they sat around, they watched you work all day. I work by myself. It's kind of hard for me to act that way when I'm sitting around, because the other part of me is sitting there, get up, go to work. But as soon as I see my boss's truck pull in the stadium, well, I get up and act like I'm doing something. Just kidding. I do have a robot that helps me paint the field now, though. So when the boss pulls up, I pick up the tablet and act like I'm doing something on it that controls the robot. A servant was to serve sincerely, not just doing what looked good or eye service. Instead, he was to do his work to the best of his ability. And the reason is plain and reveals a new meaning to what we label as mundane labor. A slave was not really working for his earthly master, folks. And I'm not working for Plano School District. He was working for the Lord, and I'm working for the Lord. And I'm just going to talk about myself tonight so that you can understand what I mean when I talk about my job, okay? And then you can relate it to your job. I want us to think of that principle the next time that we have to perform some stupid task that we might find mundane or engage in some boring routine job. It changes our attitude to realize that we are not working for the boss or even ourselves. I'm a Christian. I tell people I'm a Christian. Everything I do, yes, I get a paycheck every 2 weeks. But everything I do is a direct reflection of who I say I serve. And if I'm serving the Lord, everything I do should be for his benefit. As a matter of fact, when I say my prayers daily, I ask that he will be honored and glorified in what I do at work. I ask him to help me do a good job, but that he gets the honor and glory out of it. Jesus is watching everything we do, and he's going to reward us for our labor, no matter what our relationship with others may be when we're working. Our eternal rewards are not based on our social position. Both servant and masters can work for the Lord. The spiritual rewards that we will receive are far above any other possible reward that we could receive here on earth. Forget Employee of the Month. Forget it. We are to work for the Lord, and he will give us an eternal reward that is out of proportion to the services that we give. Don't be the type of person that just does what you got to do to get through the day, to punch that clock, and to get the paycheck. If you're going to do something, do it with all your heart. Do it with all your heart. And there's an example of this if you read the book of Philemon. Because, see, the book of Philemon is about a story about a slave that ran away. The slave's name was, I'm going to screw it up, Onesimus. And he was a runaway slave who was saved in Rome. And Onesimus became a voluntary servant to Paul. And Paul advised him to return to his master, who was Philemon, or Philemon. We had a discussion on this one night before, how to say Philemon, Philemon. I say Philemon. Anyway, Paul advised Onesimus to return to his master, Philemon, and seek forgiveness and restoration. But Paul also advised Philemon to be forgiving. And this is a historical incident that illustrates the right relationships that should exist between servants and masters. So when you go to work, we should take a great attitude with us and a good work ethic. Because we're not just working for the boss. I'm not just working for Plano School District. Everything I do I do throughout my life. If I want people to know I'm a Christian, I should act like a Christian, right? I should portray that. I should try to spread that. Our best witness is the way we conduct ourselves. You want to witness to people? You don't have to go door to door. Because if you claim to be a Christian, they're going to know you're a Christian, but they're going to pick up on every little thing you do wrong. Let's talk about masters real quick. Paul says in verse 9, "And ye masters, do the same things unto them, forbearing, threatening, knowing that your master also is in heaven, neither is there respect of persons with him." Paul got real frank with the masters, didn't he? Masters are to treat servants the same way servants were to treat their masters. They were to be sincere in their dealing with their servants and honest in their relationships. If you're in charge of people at work, some people might be supervisors. If you're in charge of people at work, you should be sincere in your dealings with them and honest in that relationship. Like many teachings, this is about making the best of a bad situation. Paul was talking about slavery here again. A master and a servant might worship in church on Sunday and then go back to work the very next day. They are taught to respect each other and to work together in Christian love. Importantly, a master was commanded to forbear or give up threats as a way to influence behavior. The reason is simple. Such behavior will not produce the desired result. You ever heard the saying, you get more flies with sugar than you do vinegar? A lot of times, the job that I do for Plano and when I worked in Westmont, during the summer, they'd hire high school kids to help me or college kids to help me. And I told everybody that's ever worked with me, I'm not going to ask you to do anything that I'm not going to get down and do with you or that I haven't already done before. And one of the mundane tasks that everybody hates in the field that I'm in is weed whacking. You ever weed whacked a fence? Drive by Plano High School and look at all the fences. Roundup is my friend. But you can't round up certain fences. You got to weed whack them. There's a 4-foot fence that goes all the way around the track. The thing's got to look pretty for a football game. You got to weed whack. It takes to weedy whip that fence on both sides of that fence. It takes 5 times to refill the string and 2.5 tanks of gas. Have you ever operated a weed whack long enough to run out of string and fill it up with gas? Come work for me in the summer. First time I did it, I was about a quarter of the way through, and I was like, the first time I worked there, and I did it. I was like, I have never ran a weedy whip out of string. I've never ran one out of gas either. And it never fails. Your string runs out, about 5 minutes later, your gas runs out. So you might as well fill the gas tank up when you redo the string. I hate weedy whipping. I hate it. Saturday morning I got up, and that's what I was doing. I was spraying all the fences at Emily Johns and Centennial School because I just got through weedy whipping them earlier. You can't spray chemicals when kids are around. So I got up on Saturday morning, and I went and me and Roundup had a party. So now honey, I don't feel like doing that when I get home. I'll cook you supper if you'll weedy whip. Getting back to masters. I never asked anybody to do anything that I'm not going to do with you or that I haven't already done. But a lot of people who are above me think that that's what those kids are there for. Put them on a weedy whip. Nah. If you have fun and get to drive an air-conditioned tractor around sometimes, when I tell you to go weedy whip, you may not complain so much about it. Or I'll say go weedy whip the fence, and then you can jump in the air-conditioned tractor and cut grass. Boy, that weedy whipping gets done quick. You get more flies with sugar than you do vinegar. Masters are taught to respect each other, and so is the worker. We're taught to respect each other, to work together in Christian love. A servant will do far more service out of love for the Lord and out of love for his master than he will because he's threatened, or even if the threat is carried out. Don't threaten people. Out of all the years, even in the Navy, anybody that's worked under me, I've only had to send one person home. Treat them the way you want to be treated. Service based on a fear of punishment will stop when the threat of punishment is removed. Service based on love and respect will continue even when the servant's no longer the obligation to serve. And a perfect example of this, and I just thought of this, was on Tuesday. I had to move all the cheerleading mats from the high school over to Emily Johns. And normally it's a two-man job. Anybody know what a cheerleading mat looks like? A cheerleading mat's about 20 feet long and about 8 feet wide, and it's rolled up. And there was 18 of them that I had to move, and I got to do it all by myself. It was a great experience. And I was at the high school, and I was loading them up. They're not really heavy. They look heavy, but they're not really heavy. I was loading them up on the box truck, and guess who came by and saw me? Alex. Alex walked up. Yeah. 3 years ago. This kid worked for me 3 years ago. He was there at the high school because he was starting a new school, and he had to get his transcripts. So he came early to get his transcripts, and he saw me loading them up, and he goes, "Mr. Ken." And I turned around, and I didn't recognize him right off the bat because he had gained about 20 pounds. It happens. And I looked at him, and I said, "Yeah, what's up, buddy?" He goes, "Do you recognize me?" I said, "Yes, you're Alex." He goes, "Yes." He goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "What I was doing when you left, dude." He goes, "Oh, moving cheerleading mats again?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "You want some help?" I said, "No, I got it, buddy." But the kid offered to help me out. We had that relationship because of the way I treated him when he worked for me. He was a good kid. He only worked 2 years, and then he moved on. But if I had treated him like a dog when he worked for me, I bet he would have just saw me from afar and said, "I ain't going to help that fat redneck." But no, he made it a point to come say hi. And then he offered to help. Wasn't even getting paid. It is also important for every master to keep in mind that he also had a master, which is what we need to keep in mind if we're ever put in a supervisory position. Folks, Jesus is in control of everything on this earth. Now, when I say he's in control of everything on this earth, he's in control of everything. Not, you may be in charge of the job, but Jesus is in control of it. He's in control of you. And we would do well to keep that in mind with our decision making. If we treat others badly on any level, we can expect our Heavenly Father to chastise us. We may have a legal right to inflict difficulties on others, but we should remember that every decision we make can be overturned in heaven. I woke up from my nap this afternoon, and the Cub game was over. And I was flipping channels because I couldn't turn channels until the Cubs were off. And I love the Andy Griffith Show. And I went to MeTV and Andy Griffith. And the episode came on where Andy had to go to Mount Pilot to be a witness, and he left Barney as acting sheriff for 8 hours. And Andy comes back from Mount Pilot, and he's got the whole town locked up in the jail. Y'all remember that episode? Barney had the authority. Barney was right. But sometimes you gotta, just because you're right doesn't make your actions right. Barney had Aunt B arrested. He had arrested Aunt B, and he had Opie in jail with her. God can make a master a slave or a slave a master. And if you think about it, that happened to Israel. It happened to Israel in Egypt and Babylon. You see, I mentioned it this morning too. God doesn't respect persons. Jesus, there is no respect of persons. He doesn't care who you are. He doesn't care how much money you make. He doesn't care how smart you are or how far you've climbed the corporate ladder. Jesus is just as much concerned for the janitor as he is the chairman of the board. They're just as important to Jesus. One of them might make 6 figures, and the other one might make minimum wage, but in Jesus' eyes, they're equal. And we also should remember that we look only on the outside. You all know the story that's in Luke chapter 16, verses 19 through 31 of Lazarus and the rich man, right? In this account, most people would choose to be the rich man, not Lazarus. But from a human vantage point, the rich man had it made while Lazarus lived a miserable life. However, in an instant, that situation was eternally changed, wasn't it? Lazarus was in heaven and the rich man was in hell. And no matter how deplorable and desperate our situation in life may be, if we have been born again, folks, we will go to heaven. And when we die, we will be eternal winners. We need to keep that in mind when evil men oppress us or when we are attempted to oppress somebody. The devil has done his work, and something is wrong if God's children regard each other as enemies. Now listen to this. When a wife and a husband think of each other as enemies and their lives are a battle, they're never going to have a happy home. And the same principle is true for children and parents and servants and masters. Before we can win the battle, we must first be able to identify who the enemy is and understand the nature of the struggle. If we cannot identify the enemy, there can be no victory in any battle. Satan does not want you to know that he's your enemy. He wants us to keep fighting with each other. He wants us to keep fighting with each other in a battle that no one can win. What has a child won when he defies his parents? What has a parent won if he mistreats his child? What has a servant won when he's unfaithful to his master? Nothing. The devil wins. The key to all proper relationships is to submit ourselves to each other in the fear of the Lord. And when we do that, we overcome our fleshly desires. I'm going to give you some homework to do. Tomorrow's Labor Day, so we don't go to work. I've never understood that. Why do we call it Labor Day if we take the day off? I'm sure, maybe I need to search the history of Labor Day and why we take Labor Day as a national holiday. I don't know, but it seems weird to me. But I'm going to give you some homework to do on Tuesday when you go back to work. You retired folks don't have to do this. I want you ever heard the story about get thee behind me, Satan? Jesus even did it. Jesus even told Satan to get behind him. When you feel tempted to do something at work that you know you shouldn't do, or maybe it's at the house, you're arguing over something dumb, just tell Satan to get behind you, because he likes to work with our relationships. We're talking about Christian relationships. When we think about Bill falling asleep while I'm preaching, I'm not going to mention that. I'm tired too, buddy. I took a nap today. Amen. Next time something like that happens and you start having negative thoughts, just tell Satan to get behind you. Satan's the one putting those thoughts in your brain to begin with. The key to all proper relationships is to submit ourselves to each other in the fear of the Lord. Our behavior never changes our souls, but when our souls are changed, there's going to be a change in our behavior. And an inward change will have an outward manifestation. A lost person finds that type of behavior hard. And it's one reason why these verses are often misunderstood. A child of God should have a sense of the source of his ultimate reward. One's rewards will not come from each other. They're going to come from Jesus. And if we just keep in mind in whatever relationship we're dealing with, whether it be a work relationship or a family relationship, or let's not even go there, but how about a church relationship when we're dealing with each other in here? It's very easy to talk bad about something you don't necessarily agree with. Somebody said something or sings a weird way or something stupid like that, and you just point it out. Tell Satan to get behind you. Satan's the one putting that in your brain. We should love each other. The way we treat each other is the way we should treat each other the way we want to be treated. We should treat each other the way Jesus wants us to treat each other. Because I'm going to tell you something. Jesus cares just as much about you, Adam, as he does about me. I'm no more important than you are to him. Our faith is under constant attack. And Satan's goal is to get us to give in and to go along with it. But folks, I'm going to tell you something. God will give us the grace to stand firm in our faith and manifest our salvation in any situation. 1 John 4:4, I'm going to end with this, says, "He that is in you is greater than he that is in the world." Our relationships with each other we need to take seriously. Not just the relationships at home, not just the relationships at work, but especially our relationships here in church. Some people will say, well, we didn't have a song service tonight. Or we didn't take the offering just right. Satan, get thee behind me. You know how many times somebody has said something to me about, well, you didn't really point out the fact that Satan, get thee behind me. That's what I'm going to start saying. I don't say it to their face, but maybe I should. Lord, thank you for the day. Thank you for many blessings. Thank you for those that showed up tonight. I pray and ask, dear Father, that as we go our separate ways, that we will remember that we are no more important than the next person in your eyes. And I pray, Lord, that we will remember that our actions are a direct reflection of you. And that you do control everything. I pray, Lord, that you be with the prayer requests, the spokens, the unspokens, be with the ones who are on the road to travel. Please be with us as we go our separate ways. Please forgive me of my sins. And thank you for everything that you've done for me. All these things I ask and pray in Jesus' name.